We usually think of history as this chaotic jumble of disconnected events, right? But what if it's not? What if, from the very beginning of time to the very end, everything that's ever happened is actually part of one single epic story? Well, that's the massive idea we're going to dig into today. So let's really sit with that question for a second. I mean, think about it. The rise and fall of empires, all the big discoveries, the wars, the celebrations. What if all of it was just another chapter in a book and the ending has already been written? Now, that's not just some philosophical question. It's the exact argument that the 18th century American theologian Jonathan Edwards made in his huge work, The History of the Work of Redemption. He didn't just write a book about it. He basically drew a map of all of time, claiming it all has one central plot. So let's go ahead and unfold that map and see what it shows us. Okay, so Edwards' big idea is this. History isn't random. It's one single story, moving from a very clear beginning through a dramatic high point all the way to a final amazing conclusion. And the plot of this entire story? He calls it the work of redemption. So what in the world is this work of redemption? Well, according to Edwards, it's not just a part of the story, it is the story. It's the engine that's been driving history forward from day one. He argued that the entire universe, every single star, every mountain, every person, was created to serve this one grand purpose. The way Edwards loved to picture it was like a grand cathedral being built over thousands of years. And he said the project didn't start with a big bang, but with a promise of a redeemer that was made right after what Christian thought calls the fall, humanity's first big mistake. That promise was the very first foundation stone, and every single thing that's happened in history since has been another stone, carefully laid in its place. All right, let's get into the first big phase of this story and see how this building gets constructed. This part covers thousands of years of Old Testament history, which Edwards saw not as a separate story, but as the long, careful preparation for the main event. Now, to really get this early part of history, you have to wrap your head around a key concept: types and shadows. The idea here is that nothing was an accident. Key people and major events were designed to be like living previews, like shadows, of the ultimate Redeemer who hadn't arrived yet. For instance, you take figures like Adam, Noah, Abraham, and King David. They were all seen as types. Yeah, they were important in their own time, but in this view, they were also kind of like incomplete sketches. Each one of them showed a little piece of what the final Redeemer would be like, all pointing forward to someone who would fulfill all those roles, but perfectly. So all of this preparation, thousands and thousands of years of it, was all leading to one single moment. This is the climax of the entire story, the central act of all history. Edwards calls it the purchase of redemption. And this event didn't just happen at random. The Bible calls it the fullness of time. And for Edwards, that was literal. It was the precise, perfectly calculated moment in history when every single thing that came before had set the stage perfectly for the main act to begin. And the purchase itself, well, it was made through immense suffering. In this story, the last hours of Christ's life aren't just a tragedy. They are a transaction of cosmic importance, kicking off with his agony in the garden. And it all culminates in the crucifixion. In this framework, this is the moment the price is paid in full. It's a moment of absolute darkness that gives way to incredible light, where the debt that was racked up at the very beginning of history is finally settled. The purchase of redemption is complete. And Christ's final words, "It is finished," they signify that this central act is done. In this view, this is the single most important moment in the history of the entire universe. The main cornerstone of that great building has now been set. But hold on, the story is far from over. The purchase has been made, but now a whole new chapter kicks off, the mission of applying that redemption to the entire world. So this period, which, by the way, is the one we're still in, is seen as this great conflict. On one side, you have the kingdom of Christ expanding as its message spreads across the globe. But on the other side, a force Edwards calls the kingdom of Satan is constantly fighting back, using everything from the persecution of the Roman emperors to the rise of figures and systems he labeled as Antichrist, a term for the ultimate enemy of this cause. From this perspective, pretty much all of history since the crucifixion has been a battlefield. But this huge conflict isn't meant to be an endless stalemate. Edwards' map of history has a final destination, an ultimate, decisive, no doubt about it triumph.
So, what does this final victory look like? Well, according to the prophecies Edwards lays out, history is barreling toward a final glorious age for the church right here on earth. This is supposed to be a time of peace like we've never seen, a time when nations turn their swords into farming tools, and the whole world is filled with prosperity and joy.
And this golden age, often called the millennium, isn't just a quick moment of peace. According to the prophecies that Edwards was following, it's set to last for a full 1,000 years, a totally unprecedented era of global triumph and harmony that acts as history's grand finale before the final judgment. And that brings us right back to the big picture, doesn't it? This 18th century theological map is a really powerful way of looking at things. So the question it leaves us with is this: what changes for us when we start to see history not as just one random thing after another, but as a single, coherent story that's actually moving toward a final goal? Well, in this grand vision of history, there is a very clear answer. The one who starts the story is the exact same one who ends it. Every event, every person, every single moment finds its meaning in the one who is the Alpha and the Omega, the great unifying author of this one single story of redemption.